McFarland, USA is a true story about a coach who was forced to move to a very small town in California after a brief altercation with a student at his former football coaching job. When Coach White arrives to the new city, he experiences major culture shock when he sees the town is predominantly Latino. He attempts to start a football team, but he soon realizes that the students are great runners, and he decides to start a cross-country team instead. This movie follows the lives of student migrant workers with hardships and how they overcame them.
According to the National Agriculture Workers Survey, NAWS, farm workers and their families faced a unique set of challenges in getting an education. Many farm workers have completed relatively few years of formal schooling. The average farm worker highest grade of school completed amongst farm workers is 7th grade. Additionally, only 10% of migrant farm workers finish high school, and 80% of adult migrant farm workers function at or below the 5th grade level. Since 1938, federal labor laws have excluded child farm workers from labor protections provided to other working children. For instance, unlike other occupations, children over the age of 12 can legally work in agriculture with their parents' permission or with their parents on the same farm. The only exception is that it cannot be during school hours. For particularly dangerous jobs, all other industries place a minimum age restriction of 18, but for farm workers the minimum age is 16 for especially dangerous jobs.
Mr. Jim White was a football coach at a high school at Boise, Idaho, but he was fired because he verbally abused his players, fought with the school board, and had other incidents. Thus, he found a job in McFarland, California, which was a place where the majority of the population were Mexican immigrants. At McFarland High School, as a football coach, PE coach, and life science teacher. However, within a week of coaching, he lost his job as a football coach and remained as PE coach and life science teacher. During his PE class, he noticed that Johnny Samaniego and Victor Puentes were really good runners. He also noticed that Tomas Valles ran 12 miles an hour when he was on his way to his house. Therefore, he asked the principal to initiate a cross-country team. Tomas Valles opposed to enter the team, but Mr. White negotiated from his suspension to get him into the team. So he recruited Tomas Valles, Damasio Diaz, David Diaz, Danny Diaz, Johnny Samaniego, Victor Puentes, and Jose Cardenas into the new McFarland's cross-country team. In their first race, which consisted of obstacles like hills, they ended in last place because they had no experience running over hills. So, Mr. White decided to go run over almond hills, but Valles felt offended because the Mexican immigrant families picked those almonds from fields. Since Mr. White knew nothing about Mexican values, beliefs, and culture, he didn't understand the circumstances that some of the runners on his team were facing. As a result, Mr. White decided to change his dispositions to learn about his runners by mediating in any problem they had. For example, Tomas Valles felt stressed about his situation at home to the point where he stood at the top of a bridge to let himself down. But White told him that if he jumped, he was going to live but not able to walk. What I believe his words meant were to tell Valles he was not going to help his family if he jumped. Also, by following his moral principles, Mr. White helped the Diaz brothers. Damasio, David, and Danny Diaz had to quit the team to help his father bring food into the family. Their father worked as a picker in the fields, and he wanted his sons to stop wasting time running. However, Mr. White went out in the fields to help their dad. As the Diaz dad recognized Mr. White's efforts, he let his sons be on the team. Things like this encourage all members of the team to continue working hard. Consequently, they were able to qualify for state finals, and more importantly, they won state championship in cross country.
One major issue that impacted teaching and learning is the language spoken in the city. Coach White barely speaks any Spanish, and in that school, McFarland, that is the main language spoken. Coach White also needed to develop and understand the background for all his athletes, since they were mostly Hispanic. Bad sportsmanship is another issue that I believe continues to play a big role in today's society. Nowadays, many coaches teach their athletes that winning is everything and anything less is something to make fun of, which leads to bullying. Some strengths Coach White had while interacting with his athletes were knowing how to communicate with them. He knew how to get their attention and what would make them want to be a part of his team. These kids needed someone to believe in them since they lived in a city where every sport loses. At the beginning, the relationship he holds with Thomas in particular leads to a powerful moment when he talks him out of jumping off the bridge after having some family problems. Another strength Coach White encountered was getting to know their culture. For example, when he went to work with the Diaz boys, that showed determination to have them on his team. Overall, I think the motivation Coach White gave to his athletes evolved throughout the whole movie. It's inspirational. I believe it takes one person to believe in these young athletes to get them on the right path. The improvement the guys have had throughout the whole movie carries on to their academic abilities.
The students in this film did have opportunities to make important life choices. They chose to be better than what they were expected to be. They proved so many people wrong about their ability to win a state championship, but most importantly, they all graduated high school and were able to obtain a higher education.
I believe McFarland USA would have more of a positive viewing for students and teachers because it just goes to show how kids, or young men in this case, who work in the fields, who have had trouble in school, and who have struggled staying out of trouble, can still turn their life around and don't have to get used to the same lifestyle they've been living their whole lives. A man who goes by the name of Jim White, who used to coach in a big school, was fired for allegedly hitting a student with an object he threw towards him. Coach White would eventually get another chance at McFarland High School, which would work in his favor because he was able to turn the lives around of 7 young students who would eventually run for him in his cross country team. Coach White picks up a cross country team because he sees the potential that some of these kids have, but he sees that potential through running. And through running, the kids are able to escape from their problems or work ethics. Like one student who had an abusive father, so all he ever knew was fighting as a way to escape from his problems or certain situations. 3 of them worked in the fields, and the other 3 were just trying to figure out their place and find out where they belonged. Coach White was able to show them that there is more to life and more to look forward to, even though these kids had their childhood taken away from them or grew up having bad experiences. Coach White was a good coach, but an even better educator, knowing these kids learned something even outside the classrooms.